and welcome to Real Talk Lounge. I'm Eva,
I'm Roxy.
and today we're going to be talking about grocery store prices. I don't know about you, but we've been noticing that there has been some big changes in the prices of groceries lately, and there's been a lot of people who have been feeling the same. So let's talk about it. What are your thoughts on it, Roxy?
Um, my thoughts are halfway between it's disgusting and it's life. Everything goes up.
I mean, I'm sort of feeling for the people on strict budgets because they're really feeling the pinch. I don't know if you saw, but even Cardi B had a TikTok, not a TikTok. She released. I'm not sure if it was TikTok or something on social media. I think it was on Twitter, where she's even noticing the prices, and people are like, "Oh, girl, whatever. Like you have the money."
I get a summary of the money that's being spent in my home every week. So when I'm starting to see they're like groceries is like tripling up, it's like, hey, I want to see for myself. Like I went to a supermarket, I'm seeing that everything tripled up.
And then she was talking about how, well, just because I have money, if you guys were rich, that's how you all would go broke real quick because you wouldn't be budgeting. um I can't play the clip here because there's more f-bombs in that clip than I could care to beep. So but we will link it below for anybody who's interested.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to check that out because okay, so I mean, we take for granted that she's rich. That means that she's not feeling the pinch. I mean, she still, if she has vehicles, she still has to buy gas. She still has to pay her employees, and I'm sure they've demanded an increase in their wages. She buys groceries too. She has to eat. She has two kids to feed. Like, even though she's rich and I'm sure she's well cushioned, she probably is feeling the same pinch. I mean, $100 in the grocery is not going as far as it used to by any means.
Well, I think she's what she does is she does look at the receipts that are given to her for the household, and she's been noticing a increase in
Mhm.
the cost of things. So I mean, it is affecting everybody. Now in North America, there's been quite a bit of stir regarding this. People are posting all over TikTok.
So I try not to complain, but this is ridiculous. This is what $116 gets you in Canada today in Interior BC. This is all I got. I got one bag of chips, one loaf of bread, baby snacks, ice cream sandwiches, 9 breasts of chicken, 2 boxes of cracker, eggs that were on sale, turkey, formula. That baby was not cheap. 2 things of melatonin, and 3 cans of pasta sauce. All of that for $116. Wow.
Price of bread, some places has gone up to like $6 a loaf, which is
Well, I mean,
insane.
even the
Uh,
price of eggs, you have to practically mortgage your house to be able to afford a dozen eggs.
Right. I mean, eggs are definitely one of the basics, and that's, I think, the concern here is um, when people are trying to just already mitigate this increasing cost by cutting down on their groceries, and they're just paring it down to the basics, and even those basics are at through the roof prices. People are becoming
Mhm.
terrified. They're doing everything they can. There's an increasing number of people going to food banks.
For sure.
People are just worried how, the salaries obviously are not on pace with the inflation. I mean, the governments have stepped in some cases to curb inflation through interest rates, but it just doesn't seem
That's
like it's
not
enough. People are still feeling it.
Yeah, no. And what's really disappointing too is I've heard instances of banks actually saying to people when they're calling to say, "Oh, can a lot of people that have mortgages, the bank will let you like defer a month payment," or people are calling their banks to kind of say, "Can you help me out a little bit with my mortgage payment and some sort of relief or something?" And banks are saying, "You know what? If you can't afford to like keep your lights on and buy food and whatever, maybe you should go to the food bank, but just make sure you pay your mortgage."
Right. I mean,
It's
everybody has their business model that they have to stick to, and I think it's not in the level of government intervention that we saw during the pandemic, where the banks did defer payments for people. But I think that was a nationwide effort where it was affecting everyone, and everything. The pandemic was it was inescapable. I think the food prices are similar in that way, but like I said, there hasn't been that much government involvement as of yet, aside from the interest rate
Well,
hikes that they've
to
been
be honest, I
doing.
mean, like, there's how much help? I mean, oh, let's get this straight. I am definitely feeling the pinch. I have had to change things in our lives. There's things definitely getting cut off. We're cutting expenses wherever we can. We're working more hours. We're doing whatever we can on the side to bring in a little bit of income. Um, but there's only so much. People complain about the government being too much involved in their business, and the government's trying to tell me to do this, and the government's trying to tell me to do that. And I don't think the government should be telling me anything. We're free citizens, yada yada yada. And
Right.
now there's a situation. It is government created, let's be honest. um how long is the government supposed to hold your hand and help you out, right? It's a difficult thing. I mean, it's the pandemic started in
So what do you mean
2020.
by it's government created?
Sorry.
What do you mean by it's government created? You said it's government created. What do you mean by that?
um Inflation, I me personally, not speaking for anybody, and I'm not, it's just my words and my thoughts. um I feel like the government and the excess printing of money and the excess handouts and whatnot has created this situation where currency has been devalued and everything's just gone out of control, along with the pandemic and along with other sources and factors and whatnot. And now they have to artificially, or not artificially, I don't know what the word is for this, but they have to now break the economy essentially. They have to break people down in order to get to the point where they can build the country back up and build the economy back up. Maybe I should get out my tin hat.
Well, I think that's what part of the issue is that there's so many factors involved in this, that it's hard to just point a finger to say, this is just grocery stores and corporate profit and corporate greed, or profit maximizing at its finest.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't ignore other factors, such as the war in Ukraine, such as the pandemic, such as just the regular, swings of the market as well. And if you do look at the trends as far as historical commodity pricing, we are sort of sitting at levels comparable to what happened at the end of 2008.
Yeah, you know what, to be honest, I'm not sure that the average person gives a flying crapola about what's going on in the market right now. They don't care about commodities. They don't care about the how much barrels the OPEC is producing or anything like that. All that the average person cares about is when I go to the grocery, I can't afford things. At the end of the month, when I have to pay rent, which is even rents and mortgages are way out of control, I can't afford things, right? And there has to be some answers. Somebody has to be accountable, right? There's something, I don't know if you're familiar with the term transfer of wealth, right? So
Mhm.
when somebody is down, somebody gets rich off of it. And I kind of feel like in this situation, there are a lot of people who are profiteering. Maybe profiteering is too strong a word, but they're definitely making their money off of the backs of people that are suffering right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, during the pandemic, it was the likes of Bezos who were getting filthy rich off the
Yeah,
pandemic, which is
and
everyone,
all those delivery services, like the Door Dashes and the Skip the Dishes and all those,
right.
their profits went through the roof too, because it's like it's an opportunity, that somebody, an entrepreneurial spirited person, decided, you know what, I see there's a gap and there's a need, so I'm going to fill it. But I mean, in the end, okay, it's just again people making money off of other people's pain.
Right. And I think this one hits really close to home for people because it is the necessities of life. Everybody needs to eat, everybody needs to go to grocery store. And they do
Mhm.
say that people remember the last price that they paid for gasoline, and they remember the last price they paid for eggs. Those are the two
Mhm.
things that stick very, very much in people's minds. And this
Mhm.
is really hurting households, especially the ones that were already on a very strict budget. And now this is putting that stress onto families it's having social implications.
Yeah.
You had talked briefly before about suicides and things like that being affected as well. Do you
Yeah,
want to
because
elaborate on
in
that?
in the so Canada has passed assisted suicide laws that it is legal to do that. And now, I think very recently, within the past couple of days, they're trying to get, aside from it being like a long-term medical issue, right? You're allowed to end your life if you're terminally ill. Now they're trying to allow you to seek out medically assisted suicide for other things other than terminal illness, such as depression. And there's actually been documented cases of a couple of people who have decided that because of their disabilities, and their lack of affordable, accessible housing, the lack of medications and whatnot, that life is getting too hard, they're suffering too much, and they don't want to do it anymore, and they have ended their life. And the concern is that when we now add the fact that people can't afford to live anymore, what is your out? You're going to end up in some cases. So in my community there is a Facebook page, for supposed to be for community events, and there are so many people reaching out to each other on this community Facebook page, trying to find affordable housing, and it's impossible. And people are telling their stories about how they're waiting years, or they're going months, and they're getting rejected because of this, or they're getting rejected because of that. There's not affordable housing for people like a family. Even as much as 5 years ago, you might have been able to find like a four-bedroom house in our area, in my area, to rent for maybe about $1,800. Now you're looking at $2,000-3,000 for the same. No, not even 2,000, like close to 3,000 plus utilities. Now, your wages haven't gone up that much, but if you're a family and you now have to pay this $3,000 in rent, and say you're making minimum wage, how are you making your rent? How are you paying your utilities? How are you affording food? So everything's going up. And there are people who are choosing, because they just can't deal with this anymore. They don't see an out, and their next step is homelessness. I don't want to deal with it. And especially, a little bit of fact, today where I am is extremely cold. It is like bone chilling cold. It's like if you go outside right now, within 5 minutes, your extremities will start to freeze and be susceptible to frostbite. Now imagine that you're outside and there's no warming centers, and there's no community services to help you with this. You can't find food. You're sleeping outside in this type of weather, right? You have children even, and there's nowhere for you to turn, and the government is, they don't even have enough resources to even help with all of this, the crisis that's happening, even if they wanted to. What do you do? So in
Hmm.
Canada, some people are choosing, I don't want to do it anymore, I want off this ride. And
Yeah,
it's
a
sad.
lot of people are, and I think housing is definitely one thing that all throughout North America, it's not hasn't for years now hasn't kept pace with inflation, and I think, or and with salaries, and I think now it's coming to a head where it's becoming almost impossible for a lot of people. I know that in California, they have, especially in Los Angeles, there's a huge issue there with homelessness, and it's just it keeps growing, and the governments can't seem to cope, or they're throwing money at the wrong issue. They're not they're doing size fits all approach, where when it comes to especially homelessness, that approach does not work, because there's people coming from too many different facets of life and experiences that,
Mhm.
you can't just throw one solution at it and expect it to work. But I mean, that's definitely an issue that is happening already. But to bring it back now, for the grocery prices, I think that's just icing on the cake for most people, or it is the one step that might end up putting them in a position of homelessness. Because if you can afford the necessities, and like I said, if you are on such a budget, where does that leave these people? Is it time for the government to get more involved? Is it time to say to the people who don't want government regulation, more involved in these affairs? Is it time to put it on the onus on the governments to actually say, hey, something's got to be done, we need
Well,
subsidies, or we need something?
well, let's discuss the moral compass of like, where does capitalism draw the line on like morality? Like, I mean, okay, so is it right or fair or just that the necessities of life, we need fuel, right? We need food. And these two sectors are making billions a year in profits, not even just in like, oh, like top line revenue, which is, I mean, if you look at it globally, yeah, you would expect that revenue would be in that area, because people need food to live. Everybody purchases food in some way, shape, or form. You must purchase food, you must purchase fuel. But to make billions in profit after your company has cleared expenses for the year, billions with a B. And in some cases, actually, with banks, and don't even get me started on banks, even, because banks with the mortgage rates and, oh, whatever, they make billions in profit in a quarter. But is that right? I mean, they're mostly making that stuff off of the backs of the little people. I don't think
Okay,
that's
but let's take an example of when it comes to food. There is some regulation, namely, if we're talking on the north of the border side, the dairy industry is very regulated in Canada. The prices are regulated for dairy
fair.
products, which means
Hmm.
that the dairy farmers of Canada, and it's a little bit different in varying provinces. However, they're being subsidized in a way with the government through regulation, where they are guaranteed a certain amount of income from their farms, from dairy. And is this something that is it a good thing? Where when you look at the prices
Right,
of dairy products, it doesn't seem to be
but
doing too much for the consumer in one way or another. I mean,
I'm not
some people
necessarily
are posting
talking
prices
about.
as much as $8 for a brick of butter,
But
and
I'm not
I saw
talking
that
about.
myself. $8.
I'm I'm not talking about the government regulating like bodies where it comes to like the food, the dairy industry or the egg industry or the wheat industry or any of those. What I'm talking about is there are grocery store chains and brands that are posting quarterly earnings, right? They post their quarterly earnings and they are above and beyond they're above and beyond what they've made in the same quarter last year, right? So let's say I'm just throwing out
Right.
numbers, and I don't want to name the specific one, but they made last year, I think it was the third quarter earnings was $203 million in a quarter last year. This year, their quarterly earnings were $231 million, right? So you're making excess of what you made last year, with all things being inflated supposedly. Why were you not able to pass $200 million in profit after tax, after expenses, profit? And if you were to multiply that, that's $800 million. Let's say it remained the same throughout all the quarters. $800 million in profit. That means that you've essentially, why can't they say, okay, well, you know what? Instead of us shooting for $800 million, why don't we shoot for $200 million in profit for the year, knowing that people are starving? People are ending up in the street. Children are starving. Older people are starving. People are suffering while this particular chain and others like them are making almost $1 billion in profit.
Right, and I think they've done studies on the reports and these profits that you're talking about, and they've done comparison analysis between the Canadian market as well as the U.S. market, and they have found, in fact, that both sectors have posted profits on the average, especially the bigger companies that act almost as if well, they've cornered the market in a lot of ways. They're not quite monopolies, but they're pretty much, dominating the markets, and there's only a few of them, and they're claiming that most of their profits have come from the pharmaceutical side of things. But anyone who's looked at the numbers and who's done an analysis on it has said that it's not conclusive there as to where those profits are coming from and whether there is price gouging going on. It is definitely suspected that there is, and I think there just needs to be more
And on top
research
of it, when
done
you
and a
talk
little bit more
about,
digging on the financials of these companies, because people are noticing, and they should be held accountable. I definitely think they should be held accountable. There should
you
be
know what,
something there
it
for the
comes
average
down to?
consumer.
It comes down to the fact that what happens is these are, and this is again the whole capitalism versus morality thing. These are publicly traded companies. They have to answer to their shareholders. Their shareholders expect, them to meet their quarterly earning targets and whatnot, and that's all well and good. But when everything's good and everything's sunshine and roses, take profits. But I think it's not, how are people supposed to live? Have a
it's
little bit
a
of
it's
heart.
it's a very good point you bring up. Right. Speaking of that, I was reading too that apparently Costco has been applauded for that they have managed. They're one of the few companies that have managed to strike a balance between keeping their consumers in mind, while they're also, obviously there for profit and keeping their shareholders happy. They've managed a nice sort of in between compromise where, for example, they're focusing still on keeping the prices as low as they can and not raising membership prices, but still maintaining their profitability. And I think eventually they will have to raise their prices, but they're trying to keep the consumers you know in mind when they're making these business decisions. And that's an example of a very large, corporate entity that is making some decisions that are for the betterment of their consumers, and not just one-sided approach of, hey, all we answer to is our shareholders, and forget the
Hmm.
rest. So I
Yeah.
think there has to be a moral component to these things. Where do we implement this, and how do you hold these corporations accountable, and hold them to these sort of moral compasses that many people would like to see?
Yeah, and the thing is I don't dispute that companies should and could make money. They need to make money. They need to have these kind of have some sort of earnings and profit in order to get loans, in order to reinvest in new buildings, new capital, purchasing power, et cetera, et cetera. Like they need money, but it's so hard. And especially then now you go over to the gas market, right? Or the fuel market. Oil is going up so much per barrel. Why do they need billions and billions in profit per quarter? I don't understand that. If somebody can help me understand why they need that much, I would love to hear it.
Definitely a good question. If anybody has any thoughts and comments about that, do leave it in the comments below. Should there be a cap on corporate profits? Should there be government involvement in that, or should it just be, hey, market is a free trade market and let it play out as it will? And especially when it comes to commodities,
Yes, I know. Please leave it in the comments. Yes, we want to hear. And you know what? For regular goods, like, if we want like a 70-inch TV and we want to pay whatever we want to pay for it, then yeah, let's pay for it. If we want to go buy clothes, especially like designer brands or whatever, if we want to pay for whatever we want to pay for it, let's pay for it. But when it comes to things that are necessities, things that you need in order to sustain life, that's where I kind of feel like there has to be a bit of a moral compass there. Then the other thing I want to say is that I
Right.
am not ignorant to the fact that there's a lot of other factors affecting food, right? I know there's a lot of climate related issues like droughts and floods, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that has something to do with it. With the egg situation, avian flu, again, that has something to do with it. There are
Right.
reasons,
And
but
and the
it
cost
kind
of grains going up.
yes. So the cost of things going up is all well and good, right? It's all justified. We can afford to pay, well, not we can afford to. I can understand the need to have to pay for scarcity because of those things. But again, when we're talking about record breaking profits, I don't think that becomes more than just covering the cost of the increase in goods and now taking some off the
Hmm.
top itself. That's Mr.
And I
Grocery
think
People.
those are really good points to bring up because there are multiple factors affecting it. And I think part of the issue here is that it's hard to definitively say what's going on, is because when they're releasing these profits, they're staying very vague as to the other components to it. So anybody looking at these releases, it's hard to decipher what is the cause of it. There's not enough transparency to accurately pinpoint exactly what is the cause of these profits, and that's part of the problem, is the lack of transparency. And if you really break it down into the nitty gritty, people say it can't be attributed to just those factors. It Even if you factor in scarcity, you factor in the droughts going on in the US, and even in Canada there's been some. If you factor in the Ukraine war, you factor in the COVID situation and everything, it still doesn't account for those profits. So there's been, I think rightly so, a lot of criticism. And in order that criticism to go away or to quell it, I think the only thing would be for them to at least be more transparent with the consumers, to say, hey, these are profits and this is how they came about. And I think that's part of the outrage here, is there is no transparency.
Mm-hmm. So then what do we say is our solution? If I go to the grocery store, aside from the heartbreak that I feel every time I do it, when you think back even a couple of years ago, how much you spent, how much you got for that money, versus now how much you spent and how little you're getting for it. What can we do? What can we do? What do you know, any tricks or anything that the average person can maybe incorporate into their shop to help them save some money?
Well, I know there's been people interviewed, and there's been some people who have been gravitating towards raising their own chickens, for example,
Oh.
and instead of paying the prices for eggs, there's a lot of sort of municipalities now throughout all of North America that have been loosening their bylaws regarding keeping backyard chickens,
Mhm.
which has been a lot of times relegated to rural communities, and letting people keep them in the backyards in the city. But I mean, that
Oh
doesn't
yes,
solve the
do you
problem.
know what
That's
they
just
have?
one
Do you know what
thing,
they have
right?
within city limits? They have the no cock law.
Oh yes, yes. I mean, nobody wants to be woken up to a rooster, right?
That's right.
I think that people are taking matters into their own hands, and doing that. But let's be real, not everybody has the means, or some people are in apartments where they don't have a backyard to have
And
chickens.
on
So
top of it, you know
and a
what?
lot of people live.
It's not as easy as just, oh, I'm gonna get two chickens and I'm gonna have eggs. There's a cost associated even with having any
Oh,
kind of
absolutely.
any kind of animal. Like, you still have to feed them. You have to make sure that they're cared for. You have to give them proper vitamins, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. And then there's the
Right,
time.
of course.
But then the other thing,
Oh
actually, I
well,
heard a
it's
very
a
good.
commitment, and chickens are loud, they're dirty, they're not easy. It's not like having a cat, right? It's not like you can
Yeah,
tell it, okay, well, you're little trained, little
yeah.
no flight bird. But I think another thing that people would love to do, I'm sure, is to boycott certain companies that are doing the supposed price gouging. The problem is, again, if we're talking about corporations that have cornered the market, it's hard to boycott when
You
when you
yeah,
boycott one
where are you
store,
gonna
but then you go
go?
to the other store that's owned by the same parent company, right? So I know in Canada there's two big grocery giant families essentially that run most of the food economy. So it's really hard to go to an independent place that's not somehow affiliated with these two families, or to find an independent. So
Mhm.
again, I think one of the things that people could do is maybe support their local farms,
And
which
one of the
some
things,
people have already
Cardi,
been doing. There has been a trend towards that, I think.
and then the other thing that is very unfortunate is that because these monopolies or these bigger grocery chains are able to, they have the ability to buy in volume, right? And obviously volume equals less per unit, and as such they're able to charge a little bit, yes, less per unit, whereas like the mom and pop, they have to buy it at whatever rate, and unfortunately they can't keep their prices as low. So as much as a lot of people would love to be able to support their local grocer, their local economy, unfortunately sometimes they just are not able to do it, especially when
They
we're
can,
trying to
yeah,
as many pennies
it,
as possible.
absolutely.
One more thing I do want to bring up, and this was actually something that was kind of interesting when I heard it. They're saying that one of the reasons that as economies all over the world, economies all over the world are experiencing these crises right now is because no economy is stable, self-sustainable anymore, right? And it does have something to do with, as you were saying, like growing your own chickens in your backyard. As a country, we don't have the ability to grow our own chickens in our backyard, so to speak. Like we rely so much on import, export, and outsourcing to lower costs that each economy is relying. For instance, the Russian Ukraine situation. Why is it affecting us here in North America? If we had our own abilities to self-sustain, we wouldn't be so much affected. Not to say we wouldn't be affected, but in theory, we would be able to do our own thing so that that stuff all the way on the other side of the world wouldn't have an effect on us.
Right. And the irony in this case is, if you look at Canada, for example, they have a lot of oil in the ground. And then you look at, even when it comes to what's really going on in Ukraine and Russia with regards to the grain situation, or because those areas are called the bread bowl of the world, right? Canada has a huge grain farming sector. So it's interesting how these things, particularly in Canada, there is quite an abundance. So I know that the prairies, they were hit with some droughts as well. So I know their production wasn't as per
Yeah,
usual.
but you see,
But
and
still,
this is
it's a
where
good
we go
point.
towards and this is where we talk about the sustainability thing. So you're talking about Canada having like vast oil and vast lumber and vast wheat fields and whatnot. But the problem is that Canada does not have the ability to process and refine at the level that's needed.
Well, it's a very interesting point, because I mean, when you look at lumber and meat, for example, we are the originating source for a lot of it. We ship it over to south of the border to process, and then it gets shipped back as a finished product. How
And
it's
it costs
absolutely
a lot
ludicrous.
more. It costs
Of
way
course,
more.
and it's same thing with oil. It gets refined. It doesn't get half of it doesn't get refined here, and then we buy it back. There's economic factors involved in all of that. But I mean, there is implications, just such as the U.S. Having shifted, their manufacturing so much so over to China, for example. They've become, because consumers want to pay less, they've essentially killed their manufacturing sector.
Mm.
Russia doesn't have much of a manufacturing sector. They more or less depend on their oil and their agriculture, basically anything that comes from the ground. So their hands are tied as well, right? And
Can
now,
I
with
say,
now the other factor that's coming into play will be,
can I
sorry,
say something? Can I say something that's going to endear me to so many people? You're going to love it.
why not?
So that is why
Okay.
Donald Trump wanted to bring so many jobs back to the American economy, because there was a lot of outsourcing that had gone on. And with all that outsourcing, again, America had lost a lot of their ability to do a lot of self-sustainable things. Yes, it cost more, but at the same time, that what was happening is jobs were being lost. And he wanted his
Okay.
Make America Great Again. I hate to say that, but what it is he wanted jobs to come back to America so that that way they could become a self-sustaining country. Do things within your borders to help your own people. This sounds so bad because it's not what I, this is not me, this is not who I am. But in a way, it makes sense. If you are working, you are making money. If you're making money, you're paying taxes, right? And on top of
Right.
paying taxes, you're going out into your own economy and spending money that again gets put back into the economy in terms of taxes, in terms of revenue growth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in a way, it made sense, but yeah,
But there's a flip side to that. I mean, the
yeah,
fact that, the reason these jobs are being, shifted overseas is because of the cost of labor in itself. That's a huge factor, right? And the cost of manufacturing, it's a give and take, right? Where how are
it's
those
like the
corporations
simplest
going to
song
post those
happiness.
record-breaking profits if they have to pay somebody $20 an hour? It's not possible, right?
Right,
So,
and
hence why.
but then we go on to, okay, well, do you want to pay less for something or do you want to be unemployed?
And there's an argument in the U.S. about, even illegal immigrant, where it has been documented that they, historically have done most of the farm labor and the likes, those kind of jobs that the American citizens aren't willing to take. So now, just recently, I read an article about how they're trying to implement almost like a prison lease system where now these prisoners are going to be rented out as laborers. And again, like, what are we doing? Going backwards? Are we
You
bringing
know what?
slavery back? What's going on, right?
You know what bothers me about that? Is that I know that a lot of prisons are for profit, right? And obviously they're going to
Yeah.
want to rent people out and they're not going to pass that on to the, I mean, in very minuscule amounts, they'll pass it on to the prisoner so that they can fill up their stuff so that they could get like,
Your
what do they call
promises. Here's $10 for the
it? Yeah, the
month for
commissary and whatnot.
120 hours of work you did last month, right?
And here's $5, but yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
anyways, on that note.
Yeah, this topic is quite vast. It's hard to contain it into one show here. So, there'll be other things that pop up that we'll talk about, and I'm sure it'll tie into what we're talking about now. So, as always, leave your comments below. Tell us what you think. How has the prices affected you out there? What is the most you paid for an item that you almost dropped because you couldn't believe your eyes?
Do you
For me,
okay,
I would have to say it was butter for sure.
can I say something? When I
Sorry?
go when
Yeah.
I go to buy groceries now, when I go to swipe my card to pay, I get a little bit tight, like I'm like I got that, oh my god, is it gonna go through? Is it gonna go
Yeah.
through? And I have to like palpitations. Oh, okay, it went through. And I'm sure I'm not alone.
Or you hold your breath to find out what the total will be at the cash register when
Oh
you bought
god.
5 items.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
All right. So I will be signing
Okay,
off
until
now.
next time.
Until next time. Bye.
Okay.
I'm Roxy.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, so I know that we covered a lot of points there, and unfortunately we don't have time to elaborate even more on that, and I'm not sure how many of you would like to sit through more. If there's any topics or suggestions you have for future episodes, please let us know. We'd be happy to talk about it. And thank you. Don't forget to subscribe, help support our channel. Till next time. Bye.